Hello, good evening and a warm welcome to South Central on ET Now. My name is Jude Sanath and for nearly 6 months now we've been bringing you India's first ever business news bulletin to focus entirely on South India and key news updates from the region. That's exactly what we're going to do on today's episode as well. So let's take a look at the headlines we're tracking at this hour. The ongoing LPG crisis sees food service companies weather a spike in operating costs. Central kitchens across Sriperumbudur, catering to factories in the region, tweak menus, shore up on firewood, and cut quantities to tide over the shortage. Thiruvananthapuram's Techno Park could see IT employees log in from home as canteens run out of LPG. Meanwhile, in Chennai, HCL Tech tells its employees to work remotely until the crisis blows over. After LA, Vancouver, Seoul and London, OTT giant Netflix now opens a global VFX hub in Hyderabad. Island Studios will cater the market for global animation, visual effects, gaming and comics. And as MS Dhoni is all set to turn out for the Chennai Super Kings at the ripe old age of 44, the team's CEO tells ET Now that the Indian and CSK legend is not being picked for only his brand value. That's a South Central exclusive. On to our top story first. The ongoing LPG crisis across the country may have put restaurants in a spot of bother, and now it's the turn of food service companies to feel the heat. Bengaluru-based corporate food supplier Rassense has turned to firewood as an alternate source of fuel to continue preparing large batches of food. At the company's central kitchen in the town of Sriperumbudur, it has tweaked menus and altered serving portions to ensure minimal use of cooking fuel. Earlier today, I stopped by this industrial kitchen that caters to a handful of companies in Chennai's automotive corridor, names like Tata Motors, MRF, Yamaha, Ashok Leyland, and many more. And I did a quick status check of how it's coping with the crisis. Here's what I found on the ground. I'm coming to you from the premises of Rassense, one of India's largest food services company, and their central kitchen in Sriperumbudur, just outside Chennai, which is seeing staff here make a transition from LPG-equipped indoor kitchens to the great outdoors using firewood as their primary fuel source. Now remember, this transition has come out by largely because of the massive LPG crisis that the country is facing, which has forced food service providers, kitchens and restaurants to largely make this transition from LPG to firewood simply because energy sources are hard to come by. Now it's rather critical that a company like this makes this transition, largely because Rassense, remember, makes 325,000 meals every single day. It caters to multiple factories, IT firms and hospitals. So what you're essentially seeing is stations that would have been indoors using LPG now shifting to firewood as these meals continue to be made as it continues to run operations, hopefully without interruption. Now, some more changes and tweaks to both menus and quantities have also been made by way of the meals that Rassense serves multiple employees at all of these establishments. For instance, chapatis, idlis, dosas and puris are out of the menu. A lot more variety rice has made an appearance, even as bananas and sprouts, food items that don't require much cooking, have made pride of presence felt on newer menus that are getting by with the LPG shortage. So a lot more firewood, a lot less LPG, and a lot more food that you can eat without cooking. That's, let's say, also a bit of a healthy add to the menus, even as central kitchens at food services companies get by with the present-day LPG crisis. So to take us through some of these changes, the cost impact that the company has been weathering and how it has rolled out these contingency measures, I'm now joined by the MD and CEO at Rasson, Sanjay Kumar. Sanjay, thanks so much for joining us on the broadcast. I know it's been a tough time for you, especially in the last week or so. Can I get a status check from you on the LPG front? How dire is the situation at present, and what's been the cost impact that you've been contending with?
So I think if you look at the three broad heads under which we can assess this impact, the biggest one is going to be the economic impact. There's also a bit around, the social and the technical pieces, which I'll talk later. So the economic impact is that LPG regulated prices are up by 25%. Okay. Now, in the trading community, it's anybody's guess. It's like you can literally have to bid to get supplies. So cost of production in the shop floor for the factories where we produce the food has shot up dramatically. And that is, very obvious conclusion, because demand-supply imbalances always result in cost spikes. The challenge we face, to your question of the broader impact, is that it is unpredictable. The biggest challenge any business will face is when there is risk and the quantum of the risk may be, assessed, but its duration cannot be. And that's where today we face a challenge. So we don't know whether this will be for 1 day, 5 days, 1 week. So we take each day as it comes. Yesterday, if you had spoken to me, I would have said, yes, we think it may kind of peter out. But today, the situation is dramatically different. So on in terms of the economic front, we see a significant impact. We also see certain challenges on the technical front. The reason being that it's not a very substitutable fuel. So anything one hears about electrical or PNG requires back-end infrastructure, which we can't see coming up in the near term. But we do see a silver lining in the dark clouds, which is longer term. We have to revisit whether our food production should be, based on energy sources which we don't have control, or those that we have control. For example, electricity and solar. So that's the thinking one will have to do. As a nation, we need to think together. This is not about the government versus private versus traders, but this is a crisis that we need to come together to manage. So yes, the impact is broader than just the economic impact.
Right, Sanjay. So let's break this down bit by bit. What is that cost spike that you are seeing? And secondly, I know that you make an average of 325,000 meals per day. So what has that number changed to in recent times?
So from a cost perspective, the prices of regulated LPG, like I said, are up by about 25% effective today, which if you see in terms of the overall cost impact on production, because LPG is not the only thing that goes into producing food. It is the fuel for producing. So there will be a 3 to 4% overall impact in the total cost. But having said that, to the second part of your question, it is whether we have had to cut back on production. The answer is no. And why is it no? We can cut back on the quantums, but we still have to feed that many number of people. They're coming to work every day. They're making cars, they're making, air conditioners, they're making two-wheelers and every other, consumer durable and use item. So production, touch wood, so far at the various plants has not been affected, which is the finished good production where we do the food. But the per capita consumption, now typically in industrial establishments and in most manufacturing units, that's about 850 to 900 grams. Now, what we are encouraging is, understanding that we may not be in war, but we are in war times. So therefore, there is a need to pull back on per capita consumption. There is also a need to re-engineer menu so that we consume less energy in what we produce, and therefore look at more steam-based cooking and more, fruits and so on, so that we at least maintain the nutrition requirements but of course not in the same grammage as we might have been used to pre-crisis. So on that side, this is how we're managing. We cannot cut back on the per capita consumption, because then you cannot say I'm going to feed 800 out of the 1,000 people in the plant today because they have enough gas. So yes, all the 1,000 have to be fed, but probably they have to be fed less per.
But I'm just curious, Sanjay, now if you pull back on the per capita consumption or production in terms of grammage, how do you get by? Because from what we're hearing, commercial establishments have completely run out of LPG. And if you're saying it's difficult to change the back end and go electric, how do you run the ship?
I'll take the last part of your sentence to say, how do you run the ship? So all I can say is I'm a captain of a ship which has sent out an SOS, and I don't know where the help is going to come from. But in terms of what is it we can do to manage the current crisis, it is a threefold strategy. First, with our customers, give them updates so that they're aware that you're working for solutions. In any crisis, communication is critical. Second, with the resources that we have, manage as far as we can to hold stocks which can at least run us through till the end of today. Because on the weekends, generally production is slightly lower because lesser people are coming to work. Third, if by Monday the situation does not improve, and then like you rightly said that everyone is up in arms, we have not felt the crisis so much because as a large producer we always have a little more stocks than the rest. But even those little more stocks are not sufficient to see us through for the next 3 to 5 days, because in most parts of India, leaving a bit in the north and west, you don't have pipe gas. So, storage itself is not as easy as we think. And if that was there, then at least there could have been some recalibration or even recalibration of fuel choices. So even that's not possible. So coming back to, how do you steer the ship out of these troubled waters? I think the first thing is to be calm. The SOS is out. The government, as we all know, is trying its best. But this is not a problem that the government has created. This is a bigger problem than that. So we have to be patient and just hope that this blows over on the weekend. I mean, that's as good as it can get. Beyond that, I don't think there's anyone who can put up his hand to say that not enough is being done. It's whatever could be done is being done. And obviously, if there is a supply side constraint, then prices are going to go up. You got to live with that. But we have to work together on this and not do blame client versus service provider, government versus private. It's not about that.
Right, and last question before I let you go. A number of F&B establishments have written to the government to see them as essential service providers. Where do you stand on that request? And second question before I let you go, the government has also formed a high-level committee to ensure a constant supply of LPG. Have you heard from them?
So to your first part, I think there is a mindset shift that India needs to have. It is not government versus, hotels versus restaurants. I mean, the government is here to work for us, and they are doing the best that they can. Whether you declassify it or, classify it the way it is not going to result in the Strait of Hormuz allowing more ships to come in. So, we have to be a little more mindful of the fact that we have a government at the end of the day which is as concerned for its citizens than any one of us are for the people that we serve. So I wouldn't jump on that bandwagon to say writing or petitioning the government is the solution to this problem. Now, the second part, yes, there is a panel. But, this is not a crisis we have faced very often in our lives to know exactly what the best solution is. There isn't a template. There isn't a precedent. The last real war we saw was many decades ago. So therefore, the solution has to be more, calibrated. Citizens have to do what they can to contribute to this crisis. The government, I believe, is doing the best that is possible. And under the circumstances, to expect that the government will have a miracle wand and because it will pass one or two, strictures will solve this problem, no, it won't. We have to think together as a society that we need to consume more responsibly, and we need to enable our government, to find a solution, some of which will be short-term and some will be enabling us long-term. Today, India is such a big power, solar producer. It is taking time to get there. Now, can we start looking at feeding solar into these areas and rather than just leaving it to go to the grid? So there are solutions that will emerge. Every crisis throws opportunities. My belief is that rather than just panicking and shooting out, mails and having petitions, let's work together to. I mean, I would be in that boat of, working together is also our tagline. Together is more as a business. And I think that's what this crisis calls for.
Well, Sanjay, let's just hope for your sake, mine, the sake of the economy and all those livelihoods that are at stake, the crisis does blow over, hopefully over the weekend, hopefully sooner rather than later. Thanks so much for joining us in the broadcast and breaking down some of those insights. And keeping with our continuing coverage of the LPG crisis, reports say IT companies in Kerala's Technopark in Thiruvananthapuram and Kochi's Info Park are considering temporary work-from-home options as the shortage disrupts food services on campuses. Several office cafeterias have either scaled down menus or halted gas-intensive cooking. This has forced employees to depend on limited options from nearby eateries that are also running out of gas. The impact is also being felt in Chennai, where HCL Tech has temporarily asked employees to work from home after LPG shortages disrupted operations at its office cafeterias. Well, the US Armed Forces, they're taking stock of Operation Epic Fury that has entered its 13th day and, of course, also acknowledging that loss of the KC-135 refueling aircraft that tragically crashed in Iraq. But back to South India now and shifting focus to Hyderabad, streaming giant Netflix has launched its 5th global Eyeline Studios production and VFX hub in the city. This strengthens the OTT giant's presence in India's animation and visual effects ecosystem. Located in the high-tech city corridor in Hyderabad, the studio will focus on advanced VFX and virtual production for Netflix shows. The Hyderabad studio becomes Eyeline's 5th global base after similar locations in Los Angeles, Vancouver, London, and Seoul. On that note, we're slipping into a really short break, but on the other side, South Central continues with more exclusives from South India. Keep watching for a very special one coming up next.